Everyone, thank you for pulling up to our global lunch today. And so before we begin, right, I'm sure all of us, you guys have all heard about Hong Kong, and I think I can speak on behalf of both Hillary and I that throughout our Pearson career, we've received so many questions of this exact thing, which is, what is Hong Kong exactly? Is it a part of China? How does it work? How is it different, right? Because we say we're from Hong Kong, we don't say we're from China. So today we have two aims. The first one is to just explain how Hong Kong is and its history and cultural context. And this can segue into our second part, which is explaining the political tensions and political history with China and some other colonialism things, essentially, yeah. So let's preface this by saying Vancouver, a ferry ride away, Metro Vancouver, the city part of Vancouver is around 3,000 kilometers square wide. So how many times of that do you think Hong Kong is compared to Metro Vancouver?
Just guess.
10 times? It's only around a third of Metro Vancouver, so it's a tiny, tiny place. And in addition to that, it has 7 to 8 times the amount of people. So
yeah, Hong Kong is located in the southern coast of China, and we have about 7.5 million of people, not including the foreign workers. And we're only half of Vancouver, but we have about 8 times of the density of population in Vancouver. And we have our own currency using Hong Kong dollar. And basically everyone speaks at least 3 languages with Cantonese, English, and Mandarin. And it's one of the most dense population city of the world.
Yeah, sure. So a short blast in the past, right? This was Hong Kong 200 years ago. Very different from the image you just saw. It's just a small fishing village on the coast of Guangdong. There's not a lot of population, a few thousand people, just fishermen mainly. And before we start from the very beginning, Hillary and I just want to preface that it is the history that Hillary and I have been taught, not the history that others have been taught. So history inevitably has biases and different perspectives, and we're just sharing our own. Okay, so how many of you guys have been to the literature and performance show? You can see Charlie's amazing performance as the opium smoker guy. And this is exactly what happened in Hong Kong and Canton in general in the early 1800s. The British people, they really, really liked Chinese tea, Chinese porcelain, Chinese silk. And you can see now in British culture, it's become an integral part, right? Tea drinking and all that. And the problem was that they were buying so many goods from China, but then they couldn't give anything in return. China didn't want anything from Britain. So then they started selling a lot of silver. China kept getting a lot of silver from Britain, and Britain was we're just going to lose. We're going to lose in this net trade balance, right? So then they started selling opium to us, which they found in India, which was, another place which they colonized before. And they sold it to us, and a ton of people started smoking it. The majority of the population got really addicted, and it was just extremely bad for, the health of the people in general. And so Lin Zexu, which was a government official, essentially took all of the 40,000 tons of opium and dumped them all in the ocean at once. You can see here. And then the British got really pissed at us, basically. And then they waged war because it was as if we were destroying their products and we were disrespecting them in some sense. And so they blitzed us with their navy. Obviously, we couldn't match the British forces at all because of what reason? Because of the Industrial Revolution. They had steam engines, they had extremely powerful machinery, and they just absolutely destroyed us. And so this led to the Treaty of Nanking because they destroyed us in the Opium War in the 1800s. So after this first Opium War, China had to cede Hong Kong Island to Britain. With Hong Kong Island meaning a third portion of Hong Kong, not the whole Hong Kong Island. And so it became a British trading port, essentially, and it started expanding a lot. And then, obviously, people are not happy with being invaded, And with that, there was a lot of tensions. There were small conflicts here and there. And 10 or so more years later, the tension was very high. And then Britain was how are you resisting? Because we are so much more superior than you in terms of military, right? And then, in this case, this time they sailed all the way through the Yangtze River, right next to Nanjing, the capital of China at the time, and China was brought down to its literal knees. And in this case, we had to sign another unfair treaty, which was the Convention of Peking, which is Beijing, same thing, where the Kowloon Peninsula, the second one-third of Hong Kong, was then ceded to Britain again. And then this started what we call the scramble for concessions, because the West, they realized, oh, China is really weak. Like, your military is terrible, right? So then all kinds of countries, Germany, the UK, France, Russia, Japan, and a few other minor nations, they started just invading all across China, right? And then, they just took many different ports, small areas from around China, and Britain was like, we're competing with our Western neighbors for control of China. It was called slicing the melon, slicing the Chinese melon, because you wanted more and more pieces. It's essentially colonialism, right? And then the UK was like, okay, we want a bit more. We want to have the strongest control over China. And hence, we had to sign a third unequal treaty in 1898, which is now called the Second Convention of Peking, which is when the new territories and some other small islands were also leased to Britain. So basically, the entire Hong Kong is now the UK's.
And like, this is like the largest part of Hong Kong. So they're only like boring it for like 99 years because it's like such a huge place compared to like Kowloon and Hong Kong Island.
And also, like, because it's 99 years, because if it's more than 100 years, that means the part is like according to the international law, then the place that's like officially belongs to like UK, but it's just like theoretically it just like rent to British, so like 99 years is the maximum.
Yeah, it's purely diplomatic, right? Like they say we're going to lease it for 99 years, but essentially at that time they were planning just to have it for as long as they can in history. And so with this, right, obviously it's terrible that the British invaded, China and took Hong Kong. But then if we look at the other side of things, after the British took control of Hong Kong, there was so much trade that was going through Hong Kong as a trading port, as a gateway from China to the rest of the Western world. And in this case, Britain invested so much money and capital into Hong Kong and really started to expand and grow. And as it was expanding though, obviously what happened was World War II. And with that, the Japanese invaded China in the Sino-Japanese War. And so a lot of refugees from mainland China, they started to flee from mainland China into Hong Kong. And then ironically, the Japanese decided to invade Hong Kong. So then the people that went to Hong Kong went back to mainland China. And then, so it went from basically the population more than halved, right? And then suddenly, when World War II finished, as the Japanese were bombed, the Chinese Civil War started. And so the Chinese immigrants that went to Hong Kong went back to mainland China, now went back from mainland China back to Hong Kong again because of the civil war in China that was going on. And with that, Hong Kong witnessed its fastest rapid industrial growth of all time because there was so much skilled labor and so much skilled labor and educated people from China that were flowing into Hong Kong and creating all kinds of businesses. And so we saw like a lot of creation of textiles and like watches and different manufacturing things, which is ironic because right now Hong Kong is zero manufacturing and it's purely like financial and global trade. And so we grew a lot essentially, but in the middle of these like 30, 40 years, there was still a lot of political tension because obviously your grandparents or your parents would not have forgotten the invasions and all these like conflicts in between. And so people were unhappy. There was unequal society. All the British people could have access to the higher power structures in the government, but essentially Hong Kong was completely controlled by the British. Our interests were not put at the front. And a lot of people were unhappy with that. There were conflicts here and there, such as the 1967 riots, and then curfews were implemented, and there was a lot of yada yada, but we'll skip through that very quickly. Essentially, there was just like conflict in between here and there. And then in the 1970s, this is what people call the prime of Hong Kong, because like there was a lot of global trade. Hong Kong was shifting from manufacturing to like global trade financial hub type of thing, because we were just becoming so much more prosperous overall. And we became one of the Asian tigers, which is, I don't know, a slogan, I suppose. And as the 1970s rolled on, it went to the 1980s, there was a lot of like movie culture, and like Bruce Lee and all that stuff. And it was getting really good. But then this time slowly caught up on everyone. And slowly, remember the treaty that was signed in 1898, right? The Second Convention of Peking. It was coming to an end. So then the Chinese and the British began negotiations on how Hong Kong would return back to China. And yeah, talks began, and then there was this agreement called the Sino-British Joint Declaration, where Hong Kong would return to China and go to this system that Hillary would explain now.
And in 1997, 1st of July, we got returned back to China after 156 years of British control. And we become the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, SAR, of China. And that means we're working under the one country, two system law, meaning that we're keeping our own economic system, we're keeping our free markets, we have our own government structure, we're allowed to sign trades and agreement with country abroad, but we have to use the name of Hong Kong SAR of China or Hong Kong China. And for example, we have our own Olympic team, and yeah, so we're working everything independently, and we can elect our own directors and teams. And at that time, the Union Jack from the Britain lowered in the government house, and Dong Ziwa, which is the first chief executive of Hong Kong, got appointed by the Beijing government.
Yeah, so this is basically, I know this part of the Global Lunch is very informative and it's a lot less discussion based, but this is essentially the answer of a lot of questions that we get, how is Hong Kong different from China? What is the gray area in between? And we have our own autonomy, we have our own judicial system, our own currency and everything, but yeah, there are still limitations.
And this is the political tension start growing with the umbrella movement, because there was a debate between democracy, and the pro-democracy activists occupied all the main street, for example, in Central Admiralty, which is the main area of Hong Kong, and they started a lot of protests, and they're all pretty peaceful compared to the 2019 protests, and there are over 100,000 of protesters at peak, which is the biggest before 2019, and all the protest camps was cleared by authority while they were trying to be able to have all the elections for chief executive and everyone in the legislature by all the citizens, but no major political reform was structured. And then the Beijing government decided to tell the Hong Kong government to stop all the protests.
Yeah, just to clarify, universal suffrage for Hong Kong elections means, in a very simple way, we want to elect our leader, but we can't really. And then we protested and nothing really happened.
We'll explain how the voting system worked later. And in 2016 to 2017, Beijing started even more intervening in Hong Kong politics by disqualifying some of the pro-independence candidates just because of their political view. And even though some of the young activists still be able to win the legislative council seats, but they have no power. And they also appointed Carrie Lam, which is argued to be helping China to be able to gain control of Hong Kong. And she also started a law that we'll mention later, which leads to the whole protest in 2019. And with that note, Hong Kong marked 20 years since the handover. And the extradition, this is the reason why we started the protest in 2019, because the Hong Kong government proposed a bill for extradition to mainland China, meaning that if you get arrested in Hong Kong, you can be sent back to China for no matter what reason or whenever.
Yeah, this was a very, very big problem, because with the implementation of this so-called extradition bill, just reiterating what Hillary said, if you commit a crime in Hong Kong, you can be put on trial in China. And some people were very unhappy with that, because it means that you're trying to gain control of the autonomy of some Hong Kong people. And in that sense, some people took it as an effort to try to control the people of Hong Kong and trying to just impose your own judiciary system over Hong Kong's previous promised autonomy, right? And then a lot of people were unhappy, obviously, and millions of people, 2 million people on the streets, which is unbelievable. 2 million people started protesting around, and in a peaceful way. They just had the flashlights on, they wore all black, and then they just went on the streets with their chants. But then the police responded with some brutality. They used batons, tear gas, pepper spray. It was really bad. A lot of people were hurt.
And we also And they also like started the protest, and the government started calling it a riot. So obviously everyone who's protesting was worried that they are going to be arrested and sent back to China eventually. And this is one of the videos showing how the police was really violent for unreasonable like there's no reason of doing that. And it's not even during the protest, it was like after the protest, people was returning home in the metro, and they started to like attack people in the metro station while there are like a lot of people.
呢條片播唔到啊！你淨係俾咗我張相啊！
你可唔可以出翻去，然之後你出翻去，跟住撳個 link？
邊條啊？
因為佢
One second, guys. This PowerPoint is not cooking. 邊度？
你出翻去之後，你唔係應該會見到有個你可以直接撳㗎。因為我係直接 insert 嗰個 video 咯，唔係
Okay.
一張相咯。
Hello? Okay.
Yeah, it should be.
It's not playing. Can you give me a YouTube link?
Yeah. 你可唔可以直接喺 YouTube 度 search 啊？我就 send 條 link 俾你。
send 條 link 俾我。
WhatsApp？
Okay. Technical difficulties. Please stand by. 跟住我播緊嗰時，你 send 埋我下一條
嘛，你可唔可以講住嗰兩個即係藍絲黃絲先啊？
While Hillary is finding the video, I'm just going to explain. We'll see the context of these like brutality moments and stuff later, but the cusp of everything is that now there's two camps, there's two sides of this this argument, right? One side is called the yellow ribbon, the Wangxi, and the other side is the blue ribbon called the Lamxi. And what it means is the yellow ribbon is the pro-protesting kind of side, where they believe that the police shouldn't have been so brutal to us. They shouldn't have just like beaten us with batons. We should advocate for our own freedom, and it's only right for us. And the second side was supporting, the police in general, because what happened was the police beat up the protesters, and the protesters got mad at the police. And so the protesters started burning all of the metro stations, causing massive havoc in the city. I remember my own experience trying to go to school. I could not go to school because literally the subway was just burning down because people were just throwing Molotovs and all kinds of things as a retaliation to the police. They thought that if the police could beat us, then we will destroy the city and show that we will not go down without a fight. And the blue ribbons just believe that the police it was reasonable for the police to try to control the protesters because the only way they could retaliate was destroy the city, which is not reasonable. And so what I'm trying to say is that there's no right or wrong in this kind of situation, in the sense that you can't really classify as someone being pro-China or anti-China or pro-democracy or anti-democracy. It was also about the overall living conditions and the benefits or the disadvantages of having such a conflict. I don't know.
But speaking of that, a lot of family got into huge argument. Usually it was the older generation being more pro-China or the blue ribbons, and the younger generation being more yellow ribbon. But my family was kind of different, because my parents was you shouldn't take a side, but my grandparents are super yellow ribbon, and they're we should support the Hong Kong freedom and fight for our freedom. And so yeah, that created a lot of family arguments, and a lot of people divorce or break up because of political viewpoints.
Come on, why is there no sound? Okay. This is the train station.
That's inside the train.
Imagine your daily life, you're trying to take the metro and this happens.
And that's literally what we take to go to school every day. So Yeah.
MTR is our metro kind of corporation. I mean, just to give a bit more context, a lot of different universities around Hong Kong were used as like places where they could go on.
Because usually like the university students are the ones who's like participating in the protest the most and being the most like aggressive, and then they would use their school to protest, and that's kind of like turning into camps for like protesting. And for example, like this university is the one that my mom teaches in, and she was not able to like go to her job or like have any classes because it was just a mess. And then now we cannot even enter university freely. Like you have to tap your student card to be able to enter it.
Protesters walk through the wreckage of their former stronghold, giving themselves up to police ready to face arrest and prosecution. This is the Hong Kong Polytechnic University.
No
What's
subtitles.
left behind?
But you can just look at the overall view, like it's just an absolute mess, right? And it was going to such an extent that there were protesters going around the university, destroying other things, and then the police tried to crack down, and it was literally like a medieval war. There was like bow and arrows that you buy from like $12 stores, and people would have like plastic bullets and all that kind of stuff. And then there would be protesters being stuck in the university, and there would be police surrounding the rest of the campus, laying siege, you know.
And there's a very famous video like of talking about, because there's like a famous bread that you eat when you're like really poor or like when you really don't have food, and then the police are like shouting at the students in the university saying that, well, we can go back to China and eat like hot pot or whatever, and you're just stuck here eating bread. And then like, so it was kind of like the police versus like the community, and people would go like find the kids of the police and go to their school just to like find them and like attack them. Like it's actually like pretty aggressive and violent. So like there's really no right and wrong for both sides. Like they definitely both did something like violent and like bad for the city.
Yeah. And with this like extremely tumultuous like 2019 protests and all this back and forth, suddenly like obviously the extradition bill didn't pass, right? From the beginning, people did not want it to happen. It did not happen. But then in 2020, the Beijing government, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, the Beijing government suddenly came with the law of national security law, meaning that they can send people back to China anytime, for whatever reason they do, like for whatever they does, which is basically the same thing as the extradition bill, but even more.
Yeah, and kind of a simplification of this national security law, like pardon my very direct speaking, right? But essentially, if you do something anti-China, you go to jail. Like this is kind of the sense of how people approached this implementation of the law, right? People were protesting, violence happened, Chinese government just swooped in with this law, and now you couldn't really do much more.
And there's like a famous newspaper who's pro democracy, which is called Penguoyapo, and there's this guy who's called Jimmy Lai, and he got sent to jail just because he's like posting what's happening and reporting what's happening in Hong Kong and the situation. And he got sent to jail for like 60 years, and he's 60 years old. So like basically until he died.
There was also like, I live in this like big residential district, and then there's like tens of thousands of people in like apartments, right? And there was this very proactive like yellow ribbon guy, and he was almost just my neighbor, you know, and he got arrested, and now he's in jail. because he was like extremely active around our community and talking about it.
But at the same time, it was really like ideological. Like there are a lot of cartoons or like restaurants that would claim themselves as like the yellow ribbon, and people would all go to like visit those restaurants. And if you're like from a big company, or like if you claim yourself with like the blue ribbon side of the situation, they're gonna ban your restaurant, and they're gonna like write different reports online saying that, oh, it's like not safe to eat in your restaurant. And yeah, so they created a lot of like tension in the city as well. And they also, like, the government changed the voting system. So originally we vote for a committee, and that committee would vote for who the chief executive would be. And now they changed the proportion of people being in each sector. For example, like you can see here, right? Originally there are 300 people on like each sector. And now they changed the sector they changed the proportion based on which one's more pro-China. Like the Chinese medicine sector has more spots than the financial sector, which is really weird because we're a financial city. Like we definitely have more people working in finance and like econ than the Chinese medicine section, but they have like way more spots than the financial industry.
Mm-hmm. And after this national security law, you could really easily see how like the Chinese government could leech their influence into Hong Kong and politics and everything else in between. Like it's very evident. For example, even in our own education system, what used to be general studies, which is like educating you on like most general things, turned into citizenship and social development, in which Hillary can give a bit of insight on.
So in the general studies originally, you need to write, I think it was, you have 3 questions and you need to choose 2 to write an essay in like an hour. And it was pretty demanding and people like have to study for it quite a lot. So they used this excuse of like, oh, it's easier for people and they would not be stressed for their exam, to change it into like, we call it CSD, which is Citizens and Social Development. And in the first sentence of the book is saying how like the British never owned Hong Kong. Like it never happened. So people claim it as like a propaganda, and they kind of want to brainwash us and the newer generation to think that it never happened and Hong Kong had always belonged to China.
Yeah, and I'm sure each one of us here have like, or at least the second years have done their individual orals for their language A, right? For this, there was also an oral which you're kind of talking about how society can be better off with this policy or that policy. And people kind of joke that you kind of completely have to talk against your own political ideals if you're against China to get good grades.
Yeah, like in the essay, you basically just write like, oh yeah, national security law is like good for the society. It's like the best, and like China's protecting us, and you'll pass. Because you only need to pass. It's either pass or fail. And if you fail, you won't be able to get your diploma.
Mm-hmm. And in addition...
Great question. Did you guys write this?
No, because it's basically the same exam as IB. So like I did the first year of it, and then and then I left.
Yeah, same as me. I did the first year of this. I didn't sit my exams because I came to Pearson.
Yeah.
And not even just about education or like the political standpoint of things. We can also look at how like the financial district or like different companies and like things are affected. For example, we know that China has very cheap products. Everything is like, the cost is a lot lower, right? And now a lot of Chinese chain stores, they're leaking into, not leaking, but like they're working their way, expanding towards the Hong Kong market, where Hong Kong is one of the most capitalist places on the planet, right? And, even our banks, our currency, it's like printed by private banks. There's no like central currency. And so, in this case, these things like Mixue Bingcheng, which is like a boba tea store, they're a lot cheaper than all of the local Hong Kong ones, and they can absolutely destroy the competition. Yeah.
Yeah, and like after 2019, there is about definitely over like 300,000 of Hong Kong people moved away from Hong Kong. Most of them moved to the UK because we have like a special visa that if your parents are born before 1997, then your family and your kids can move to the UK for 5 years and get the PR, which is like pretty convenient for like Hong Kongers to move to the UK. And there's also like special stream for Canada, Australia, and like a few more countries that we can immigrate there way easier.
Yeah, I also want to add on that this immigration thing was not only the case in 2021, because throughout the decades and decades of this, there have been a lot of immigration in our history. You know, just look at Richmond, Vancouver, right? People literally call it the Cantonese like area in Vancouver because there are so many immigrants that are coming from Hong Kong because they were afraid of like the Chinese government and like the sphere of influence. So yeah, this is around the end of our presentation, and we're very happy to be able to share this with you. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Is there any questions? Jason?
During the crackdown, like those police are from China or
Hong Kong, Hong Kong police.
Yeah. Ludo?
so like China kind of created laws with the last one to like kind of try to gain Hong Kong back. And I know right now China is always saying we're gonna gain Hong Kong back. So like how do you feel about this? Are they continuing to put more and more laws in place, or it's stable since 2020? Finally, just covered all their problems.
I think in the sense that the freedom of speech is becoming a lot less pronounced in the recent years. Like you can see in the protests, people are very vocal. Now, if you walk in the street and you walk to someone, what do you think about the situation between Hong Kong and China? I would prefer not to speak.
Yeah.
Goodbye. Like that would be the response. So it's just like you're being a lot more silent, and because of the national security law, everyone is afraid.
Like I feel like they're not really implementing any more laws because that was enough. And then like people who are pro-China already like moved to Hong Kong, and the governments are like all controlled, so they don't really need to like do anything more.
Shizuki?
I just had a question about like the language and like in Hong Kong you use Cantonese,
Yes.
but like is it switching to Mandarin as a way to be more like China, or is it like how is that split between using Mandarin or Cantonese or even English?
Well, do you want to answer it?
Yeah,
Okay.
like I can only speak from like my school. I think there are definitely more people, especially in the newer generation, are speaking more English and Mandarin than Cantonese. Like they would not want to speak to you in Cantonese, and like obviously they still think like speaking in English is like better, at least in my school. So like they would speak to you in English more often, but their second language would be Mandarin instead of Cantonese.
Yeah, I think this also ties into like the big question of like, why is it inherently bad if China takes control of Hong Kong? Like, why is it inherently bad, right? Well, the reason is because Hong Kong is so culturally different from China fundamentally that it does not feel right that we are the same part of China. We speak a different language, Cantonese. Like our dim sum culture, like some of it is assimilated with China already to some extent. But then like even our way of doing things, our public transport, our architecture, everything in between, it feels like two different countries.
And even like we both write Chinese, but we write different Chinese. Like we write traditional, and like in China they write simplified Chinese, and we can't really like communicate if like it's the same thing, because a lot of people in the older generation, especially like in the 30s or to the 50s, they can't really speak Mandarin that well because they never learned it at school. So like the communication would also be a problem if we just stopped speaking in Cantonese in Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm. Questions? Noah?
How would, in your opinion, how would the general feeling of Hong Kong residents be towards British possession in the past? Would you say they're proud? Would you say it's important to them?
That's a great question. I think a lot of the people back then would have wished that the British rule continued because, as I said, it was like the prime of Hong Kong culturally in terms of like, movies and like architecture and like the style of living, everything. I think people were quite nostalgic, yeah.
And I think most of the people are still like really proud that we're like all our infrastructure and our transportation looks different than the ones in China because we're like they're all designed by like the British, so like they're all proud of like being different. So I think that's why. It's not because like it's the British, but it's more like because we're different.
Mm-hmm. You look at these buildings over there. Mm-hmm. These are like very British influenced buildings. like fundamentally another thing, right? Culturally, Hong Kong is so different from China because of this 100 plus year kind of Western ruling. We're like kind of this melting pot of Western and Asian values, and it's in its own way very beautiful.
Avery?
I'm curious about whether like the Chinese civilians also had like some sort of reaction, or if it was like mostly localized in Hong Kong, or like if there was any reaction to the human rights abuse or like police brutality from mainland China as well.
Do you guys have anything?
I think like on one hand, it's like there are a lot of, not a lot, but like there are a few things that's like happening in the society, but like those things are like less reported by the social media. But like these things are not like because I don't know like since I've born, I never seen a lot of things that are like violent happening around me. But like, I definitely know that like especially like during COVID-19 that the social tensions is like increased a lot and there are a lot of things like happening and that the government want to like try to like forbid some like freedoms in the social media.
Yeah, I think like similar to Charlie, but similar idea to Charlie, but I think in like China, it really depends on like I guess how much do you care about the politics and how much are you influenced by this kind of the Hong Kong China conflict. But like I think in general, I feel like in our media, because China has its very own like media network, there's not too much coverage on the issue. Like I feel like most of the media coverage is pro China, definitely like pro like integrating China and Hong Kong together. You see like how the way that the media frames the protest and everything, it's kind of like, oh, it's a good thing to have Hong Kong and China to be together once again. But I think at least in my family, when we hear about the news, it's more like the safety concerns in Hong Kong. Like we kind of look at the safety issues around the polices and protesting.
Also like China is very big and then people really have like different diverse opinions on this. Some people are left, some people are right. And then like it's really like biased if you like see like people like Chinese people in Pearson. Like we cannot like represent the Chinese people overall because like Chinese people like point of view is very like diverse and then like we like basically like we generally came from like more like wealthy families so that like we are like naturally more progressive like regarding to like Chinese like government and stuff so like our like background and our opinion cannot really like represent the overall generation but like in general like we come from like coastal areas which is more like developed economically and we have like more like liberal like in our places to like have the freedom of speech and stuff but whereas like in a lot of like regions and cities that are less developed it's harder for them to have the access to like the freedom of speech but they also doesn't really need it because they are not really it's like they're not they're lack of education so they don't really have this like kind of like anti-government like kind of chain of thought so like they also like kind of don't have like most of the country come from like around the border areas that's
Yeah. Yes, I wanted to ask, like, of those recent dynamics, like, how's the response of the of the Hong Kong government? Just like, does it have a solid position in that? And if there was any sort of economic backlash from the companies that operate in Hong Kong to that, like, at least from the corporate side, like, are the companies that operate in Hong Kong more willing or more like opposed to that influence of China?
I think it's definitely opposing because, as I mentioned, like the Chinese with like, I mean, we're Chinese too, but the mainland Chinese companies with like such low costs, they can like blitz the market. And in that sense, it's also really bad for us because right now the border between Hong Kong and Shenzhen, which is like right above us in China, is like becoming less and less of a border. And actually right now you can just go tap your identity card and go right past. It's like a metro. And like every weekend, there's like hundreds and thousands of Hong Kong people that are going to Shenzhen and spending a lot of money because it's cheap, and then coming back when the weekend is over. And it's like a lot of like currency that's going into China instead of going into Hong Kong, and it's definitely hurting us.
And it's also like it's so close that people would obviously rather spend money in China if it's cheaper, because most of the people who are like pro Hong Kong and like all the yellow ribbon, they all left Hong Kong. Like they all immigrated to other places. So now like the people who are left are like more likely to be blue ribbon or like even red ribbon, who's like really pro China type of people, and they would just care about like their daily life and not like the political situation. And in China, their salary is like so much lower, at least in Shenzhen area, and their production cost is way cheaper. So if they send all the products that's produced in China to Hong Kong to sell it, it's going to be way cheaper than like us producing it.
Another question for me, I'm wondering in this time of where geopolitics is kind of like big balls move, like with Trump, where he just pushes his troops into the country, and then with Putin with Ukraine. What's stopping China from doing the same with Hong Kong? Why am I not seeing tanks lining up along the border and stuff like that?
Well, here's the thing. There's really nothing stopping them because Hong Kong does not have a military. If they really wanted to, they can bring all of their military, come straight to Hong Kong and take it. And now it's Hong Kong, state of China. They can do it however they want. I think, at least in my kind of perspective, I'm really like broadcasting my own political opinion. But Hong Kong SAR, we call it Special Administrative Region. The reason of an SAR was also in a sense to show like Taiwan how like it is able to have like its own degree of autonomy despite being under the band of China. And in the sense that right now SAR is kind of losing its purpose because no matter what, Taiwan is not going back to China, right? And so I think that there's nothing stopping military like takeover, but they don't need to because under the basic law, it's already happening anyways.
Like they wouldn't need to do anything just because they can do it anytime and they already own it. And they're just doing it to like show Taiwan how like, oh, that's what you will be, like it's different. And they're just like trying to show international like that we're still different and you can still invest in Hong Kong and we're like still NSAR, but it's not really different.
Any more questions?
So I wonder, this is kind of a generic question, but how do you see the future being? Like, after that time elapsed, you said the 99 years, and then there was some other time after that. Is there another time period by which, like, if it elapses, something new will happen with Hong Kong, or no? And if not, do you think there will, how do you think the future for Hong Kong will be? Do you think eventually it will integrate, or will it be like Taiwan, as you said, never be part of China?
I think we are definitely different from Taiwan because they're like a country and we're more like a special region. And then, yes, there's originally the one country, two system law was like for 50 years. So it's supposed to be last until 2047. But I don't think that's really a time limit anymore because I think they did it earlier. So like they already finished what they would have to do in 2047. So I think we're just gonna stay like this and not be able to do anything. You agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question. So you mentioned poverty brand, and I'm wondering why it's destroying the industry of milk tea, because lowering price is just a common strategy for business selling. And also, the low price is certainly a big aspect, but if it's don't have a good quality, why people will buy it even if it is?
I can track back into that 蜜雪冰城 thing because like obviously it serves as a metaphor, right, of how other Chinese private companies can blitz the Hong Kong market, but also in the other sense, it was not really high quality. Like there were a lot of like, I know this is not extremely relevant to this problem, but like there were a lot of problems, and I remember like the Bureau of Health or something checked their like nutritional like values, and there were a lot of like toxic sugary compounds that were into it, and then that's why it was banned in a lot of locations. And this specific image is actually, I think, one of the only 蜜雪冰城s in Hong Kong now. But like, I'm not saying that Chinese products are lower quality, not at all, to not any extent, and that lowering prices in a market, like this is getting very econ now, right? But lowering prices in the market is good to drive competition, but not when we were operating under a completely different economical system before. Like, for example, Chinese EVs can also blitz into the US and like completely wipe out Tesla. But it's like not happening because of certain economic restrictions. And like you want to protect your local industry.
And I don't think like the quality is like the same. Like, not using this as an example and not saying like Chinese good is worse or like better. Because there's like one study of 农夫山泉, like it's a water brand and it's like one of the biggest brand in China. It's right? Yeah. And they like, we had a test on water because we have like the consumption organization that's like testing all the water every year. And they tested that doesn't fit our standard of water, but everyone who's involved in this study got fired just because they said that like it doesn't fit the quality. And now they changed the study to kind of like, oh, it's actually not that bad.
Yeah, I agree. And at least it's not China's intention. It's the spread and
we are a bit over time, so if that's all right, we will have to be heading off.
Yeah, Telly.
So I have a really quick question, and this is more personal, so you can feel free to skip it. But I think Hong Kong has a really complicated history of the 99 years of peace and being basically colonized by the British, but then being originally from China, and now just melting pot, as Kevin said. And in an ideal world, what would the ideal Hong Kong look like for both?
That's a very good question. Do you want to answer first?
Like I would say it would be under like one country, two system. Like they should follow all the rules they committed to us under the law, under our basic law. And also like we should have our, what is it called? Universal suffrage of like, meaning that we can all elect our leaders instead of trying to vote for a committee to represent us. Yeah.
We still have 2 minutes left, Reese, but I want to answer these questions, right?
Yeah, of course.
Like, in the sense that I want to clarify, Hillary and I do not hate China. We do not have any, like, we do not despise China in any degree. Like, it's simply that we wish the one country, two systems was actually imposed and it was actually, like, acted upon. That we can have our own autonomy, we can choose our own leaders. That's what we ask for. Adi?
Really quick, why would you want to be under China in the first place then? Why would you rather strive for Hong Kong being a completely independent nation?
Because I don't think we have the military for it, and I do think Hong Kong is part of China and not a country. So I think it's like under our law, we were returned back to China. It's not like now that we're not controlled by the British, we are a country. Like I do think we're part of China and we're protected by their military. So I don't think we could be independent in any way.
Yeah, fundamentally, if you look back 200 years, we were a fishing village in China. It was still in China. And I think like generally it makes sense that we are still under China. But like in our own independent nation, it becomes very, very difficult because like we get a lot of benefits from China as well. They give us a lot of products at a cheaper price. We cannot sustain ourselves. We do not have any oil. We do not have any manufacturing. We're simply like an economic hub almost.
Yeah, we don't produce anything. We buy water from China and all the trades we do are like from abroad to China. So like basically a lot of money that we gain are from China. So I don't think we can be a country.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Kevin.
you so much.
Thank you.